Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming and spending your Tuesday night with us. My name is Chantal Oechsle, and I'm the chair of CD6, which is the Blaine area over to St. Cloud and down around to Carver County. And I just want to welcome you all to the Greater Minnesota Candidate Forum tonight. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Of course, you're going to hear from 6 candidates tonight, so if you have questions for any of them, you can submit those still, and we'll forward them to the candidates after this event at www.cd6dfl.com/question. And this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on youtube.com on the CD6's YouTube, which the username is at CD6DFL in the next couple of days. I'll try to send out an email with that link, but if you want to know when the video drops immediately, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get notification quickly. And I just want to go ahead and introduce the other party leaders here who helped make this event possible. So I'm going to pass it off first to Jen Cronin, Chair of CD7.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Chantal and her team from CD6. We're grateful to have you with us this evening. If you have any questions, I'll be running tech in the background. And then who's ever next?
Thanks, Chantal. I couldn't get unmuted without her. Uh, this is Lori Sellner. Thank you to CD6 Chair for all the work you did on this. All that I really did was try and get some Southern Minnesotans to show up, and I see plenty of them, and I'm glad to see our great candidate for Congress, Jake Johnson, joining us tonight. So welcome to everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Who's next, Chantal?
Oh, Jen, it looks like I got unmuted, so I'll go next. So, Richard Gehrke, CDH Chair, thank you everybody for being here tonight. I know it's a work night. I know it's in the middle of the week, but thank you for being here for this very important conversation tonight and the opportunity to hear from our great slate of candidates this evening.
All right, so moving right on along, we're going to hear opening remarks tonight from Amy Klobuchar. For those of you who don't know, Amy Klobuchar has earned a reputation of being an effective, results-driven senator who fights to lower costs, stand up for democracy, and get things done that make a real difference in people's lives. Every year, she visits all 87 Minnesota counties because she knows she has to show up for all Minnesotans. Amy first got involved in politics after the birth of her and her husband John's daughter Abigail, who was sick when she was born. Even though Abigail was in intensive care, because of insurance rules, Amy was discharged from the hospital after just 24 hours. She took that experience and became the leading advocate for the successful passage of one of the first laws in the country guaranteeing 48-hour hospital stays for new moms and their babies. Before becoming a senator, Amy served as Hennepin County attorney, going after crime and fraud and pursuing justice without fear or favor. In the Senate, Amy was ranked #1 for bipartisan bills and #3 out of 100 for getting bills passed into law, from transportation to projects across the state to help for our families in rural areas to lower prescription drug costs for our seniors. Now, as she steps forward to run for the governor of Minnesota, she's ready to bring that same results-driven leadership to move our state forward. Please welcome Senator Amy Klobuchar.
We are looking for Senator Klobuchar in the chat. One moment, please. Trista, you are unmuted.
Thanks, Jen. I was just going to share that the senator is ready to speak, but our link had us all log in under the name Chantal. If you could
That's
go
what I
ahead
figured.
and change her name and unmute the senator, please. We're ready to go.
I changed her name, so.
Thank you so much.
Yay! There we are. Hey everyone. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love that you're getting all the candidates together. And I want to thank Chantal, who I was for a while. I guess I had her name. And everyone else that's been involved in this. And I think that one of the major, as we deal with Donald Trump's craziness today and the horror of everything he does, it is great for me to end my day with all of you who understand that democracy is well and thriving and that you are part of democracy in action. And I want to thank you for doing that and caring so much about our candidates. I think you know that we are stronger together and that we may have differences in some of our races right now, but that's healthy. That's democracy. And the most important thing is that in the end, that we all come together to win. And I have been so proud of our Democrats and those that are coming with us, including some independents and moderate Republicans, especially in greater Minnesota. When you look at the numbers, we all know there were 110,000 people at the No Kings March in St. Paul. Okay, I saw it, I was there. But we also know there were 4,000 voices in Rochester. We had 4,000 more across Mankato and St. Peter, 3,000 in St. Cloud, 2,600 in Chaska, 2,000 in Fargo Moorhead. Woohoo! We'll bring in North Dakota with us when we can. 650 in Wilmer. I was just out there with DFLers. 7,500 in Duluth. I was just up there. 1,500 in Bemidji, and was with a number of our Bemidji DFLers just about 5 days ago, and 1,800 in Brainerd. So when democracy is on the line, we all stand up. We've been doing that for years. And I think you know we are at a moment like no other. The president has launched a unilateral war in Iran, refused to come to Congress. We're finally starting to see in the Senate one or two Republicans stand up and say that demand a vote when it comes to the War Powers Act. We must continue to push them. Because they have simply been a rubber stamp for everything that he wants to do. He flouts the law, he breaks the rules, and the only way that we are going to be able to stand up to this is through our democracy. And I think you know what is on the line in the Senate race and in the congressional races that you're going to talk about today. But I think you also know, as was mentioned, thank you for the nice introduction, that for years I believe that you go not just where it's comfortable, but where it's uncomfortable, that I go to all 87 counties. I think in some of your counties, I literally have met every person in that county after going there so many times. And I think that is a lot about what this election is going to be about. You see across the country that Democrats have been winning in places like a legislative seat in Texas that we were behind by 10 points, 20 points in the last election, and we flip it. The Omaha mayor's race, the Miami mayor's race, the governor's race in Virginia. Time and time again, we either overperform, but most likely win these seats. And so that's the environment we're in right now, as Americans have had it with the cost, with the chaos, and with the corruption of this administration and this president. We have to make the case that Trump doesn't trump the Constitution, and there's no place better to make that case than Minnesota, where we stood up, not just those people marching in the 10 below zero weather, 50,000 people, and you think about that, and then the next day, just 12 hours later, border control agents, 5 of them, couldn't handle a VA nurse with a cell phone and shot him in the back. That's what we are up against here with this administration. but I am so proud of Minnesota. I think you saw that the Profiles in Courage Award is going to our state, and it's going to the Twin Cities, but I think that includes everyone else as well. And I noticed that Caroline Kennedy made clear, and I talked to her ahead of time, that it wasn't going to an elected official, that was going to the people. And I had this constituent breakfast last week in Washington, and this little 14-year-old girl from St. Paul came up to me, and she goes, "I realize that award's going to me," she said to herself. And that's the kind of thing we have to seize on, that moment of us standing up and really bring it out to the whole country and make sure that we continue that energy in those marches, including the big ones in rural Minnesota, and bring them into this election. So you all know I had a big decision to make this year, and I love my job in the Senate. I truly do. Some people don't. I like it. I'm always up for a challenge, but I love our state more. So in the wake of the loss of our beloved Melissa and her husband, Mark, and those little kids gunned down in Annunciation Church, and the 3,000 ICE agents, and the deaths of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, I had to make a decision in a moment like no other when Tim called me over and said to the House and said, "I've decided not to run." And I decided to do what I felt was right for our state and for the changes that I want to make for our state, and I knew and hoped that I would have you at my back, and you have all been wonderful, and I know that it's going to be a long journey. I started from zero. I couldn't move over any of the federal money, but we've been busy working on that and raising money, but we've also been building a volunteer base. And you guys know I love going to grassroots events. I love parades. Everyone knows that. And I just love getting out throughout the state. And that's what I've been doing in this campaign and in my job. So when you look at what we have ahead for the next governor. For me, I look at this as wanting to stand up to Donald Trump and not be a rubber stamp. I think you all know that. I've taken on huge fights through the years, and including questioning Kristi Noem in a major way, and 2 days later she got fired, yes. And I've taken on those fights. But I also know that we need to get things done for our state. And I think you can do both things at once. And for me, that means working with people I don't always agree with for the betterment of our state. And for me, that means taking the experience that I have, getting things done. I know where all the money is. I know what grants we can get in. I know what helps our state, and getting that done. And then also being willing to step back and say what needs to be fixed here. I hate fraud. I used to be the Hennepin County attorney, and I am ready to make what changes we need to make sure in a compassionate way that the money is getting to the people that should, and that we're not getting ripped off as taxpayers. And I will make that case strongly based on my experience as a prosecutor, but also my ideas for how to make state government work better. I also think that we need to add more good paying jobs to our state. I've got a very good record with the unions and a number of their endorsements already. And we need to make it easier to get more jobs in our state. And that means speeding up some of our construction projects and looking what our rules are and the like, while still keeping environmental protections in place and making sure that our state is safe for all. So the biggest thing for me is just to get us to a different plane. And that means following through on what we started this year, which is not looking away when things are bad, but looking at each other. It means not looking down when Donald Trump tries to trash us and bring us to our knees, but instead looking up and take guidance from the North Star. That's what I've always done, and I'm going to need your support. I want to be a transformative governor. That was actually a line from one of my Senate colleagues who was trying to talk me out of running for governor. He said, well, if you're going to do this, you better be a transformative governor. And I said, I will be a transformative governor. I'm also working, of course, with Zack and with Aaron and with the House and Senate caucuses, and know how important that is going to be for us to bring people with us with that very close legislature and to get things done. So I mostly want to thank you and just let you know how committed I am. I truly believe that if we're going to do good, we have to believe that good will prevail. I believe that, and I know you do too. So I hope you have fun tonight with these great candidates and be respectful of them. They're putting themselves out there at one of the most difficult times in the history of our country. They have said, send me. They have said that I'm willing to run. And so listen, and I know you'll make your own decisions about everything. But I can tell you right now that I'm committed not just to winning big in the areas that we always win in, but to reaching out across the state. Because when you look at these tariffs and you look at the effect of this war right now on rural Minnesota, they are really getting socked by it. And I have been making that case since Trump first got in, and I will be the one that can make the case going into the fall. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for everything you do, and I will see you on the road.
Thank you so much, Amy, for coming on with us tonight.
Okay, have fun.
Yeah, see you. All right, moving right along, just a few ground rules that I shared with each of the candidates as we're heading into the work tonight. This is not a debate. The candidates will only be answering questions, and they'll be each taking a segment of time to do so we can focus on each of them individually. Questions were submitted online, and I have them selected with name and congressional district for inclusion tonight. Candidates will focus this evening only on their individual candidacy and goals and not their opponents. And any candidates who engage in attacks of their opponents will forfeit their time. All candidates in each race are going to answer the exact same questions. So if you have a question that's not included tonight, we will be passing them up to each of the candidates in their respective races to be answered with you individually afterwards. And candidates will be asked to stay within their time frame. We have a lot of stuff to cover tonight. So we're going to start with the U.S. Senate candidates here right off the top. And so we're going to start with Peggy Flanagan first. She's currently our lieutenant governor, of course.
Lieutenant Governor, you are unmuted.
Okay, you just want me to jump in? All right. Well, thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peggy Flanagan. My Ojibwe name is Speaks in a Loud and Clear Voice Woman, and I'm so grateful to be able to have this time with you tonight. Thank you so much for arranging this opportunity for us to come together virtually in this room. I'm running for the U.S. Senate because I want people to be able to afford the lives they want to live. And as we've been traveling across the state of Minnesota, I have done 82 individual campaign stops across CD 1, 6, 7, and 8. And as we are taking this show on the road, what we are hearing from people is that they are ready for Democrats to stop fighting from a defensive crouch, and they are ready for bold leadership. The things that we hear from folks is that they are ready to stop Wall Street from buying up entire neighborhoods, buying up entire farms and pricing people out. They tell us that they are ready for universal child care. They are ready to make sure that farmers can fix their own damn equipment. They tell us that they are ready for Medicare for all, and they are ready to get corporations out of our politics, which is why I am not taking a dime of corporate PAC money, because I want to be beholden to the voters of Minnesota and to you, and not to big corporations. This campaign is people powered. It is a campaign of the many, and our endorsements so far that we are able to that we've been able to amass include Senator Tina Smith, who I have tremendous love and respect for, that she's endorsed me to succeed her in the Senate. We picked up endorsements from over 85 state and local elected officials all across Minnesota, MAPE, SEIU, UFCW, Indivisible, Minnesota 5051. And the most important endorsement, friends, would be from all of you. I think the DFL endorsement and is incredibly important, especially as we saw turnout in the amount of 37,000 people across the state. And in every convention we go, when people say, how many of you, this is your first convention? Half the hands, 3/4 of the hands go up. That is a tremendous opportunity for us to make sure that we are building support. We are keeping folks engaged, not just for 2026, but for 2028, 2030, 2032, and beyond. Because the DFL party, this is the future of Minnesota. And I'd be honored and humbled to earn your endorsement. And I'm ready to take your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peggy. So Marin Schroeder of CD1 asks, the DFL has typically focused on voters in urban and suburban areas, leaving rural Minnesotans feeling disconnected from the party and legislative candidates struggling. As a statewide candidate, what will you do to reach those rural voters who may be disaffected Republicans and support down ballot candidates in those spaces?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that question. And here's the deal. This is how we've been running this race for the last year. Our voters, people who share our values, are everywhere across the state. And so we should be spending time getting out there and having these conversations with folks. We've done events in the VFW in East Grand Forks, in the basement of the Hibbing Library next to the Bob Dylan exhibit, at PK Egan's and Egan's in Canby, Minnesota. And so far, we've done 21 events in CD1, 10 events in CD6, 23 events in CD7, and 28 events in CD8. And we are just getting warmed up, friends. And that is how you do this. We build relationships with people. As someone who has been in statewide office for the last 7 years and some change, I can tell you that the greatest thing that we can do is meet people where they're at. Because I think that is the way that we build power. It is the way that we reach across lines of difference to bring people in. And here's the deal. Not everyone is going to agree with us. And for a lot of the events that we've done, we've had folks who've shown up who are DFLers, but also people who say, like, I'm not a member of any political party. I'm just super freaked out with what I see happening right now. And we say, come on in. And then we've also had folks who said, I voted for Trump in the past, but I'm here. And our job is to get off our high horse, to welcome people in and say, we are so glad that you're here. And so that is the work. And we've had a couple of former Republican legislators show up at some of our events. And, you know, one of them said, I'm not here to cause trouble. And I said, it's okay if you were, I can handle it. But, you know, she said, I'm here because you're here to listen. Nobody's listening to us. That is the work. That is the job. That is how we are going to build and rebuild this party. And that's a winning politics and how we've been running this race since the very beginning.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Diane O'Mara of CD1 asks, how do you plan to support our public schools and public youth programs given years of underfunding?
Absolutely. So I am a recovering youth worker. That is work that I did in the nonprofit sector. And I can tell you, right, that, you know, as the former executive director of Children's Defense Fund, one of the things that I have learned is that children and families don't come in pieces. And so that is how we have tried. I think the governor and I have tried to approach this work in our time in office, but also when I was at CDF and when I was in the legislature, because we know that in order for our young people to be successful, in order to do well in school, you need to have a full belly. So making sure that kids have access to breakfast and lunch, you know, at school, that matters. Fully funding special education as a recovering school board member, I can also tell you how incredibly important that is. Congress has never met their commitment to do that. That's something that I want to fight for. And frankly, that's something that Congresswoman Craig and I have in common. And I think that that's a really good thing. And for me, it is also making sure, especially as we are looking towards how we recover after Operation Metro Surge. And let's be clear, ICE agents weren't just and aren't just in the Twin Cities. They are moving out to greater Minnesota. They are in rural communities causing violence and terror. And part of the way that we make sure that we rebuild and that we invest in education is also by repairing what they have broken, what they have left at our doorstep. We have to claw back that $75 billion and use that to invest in our young people. And, you know, right now, we know that there are kids who have an ACE score, an adverse childhood experience score, simply because there were federal agents here in Minnesota. They have to repair what they've broken, and we need investments in mental health. We need investments in our public schools. And frankly, we need partners at the federal level and not foes. And so investments in our public schools. I am a proud public school graduate, matters. Our teachers need to be paid competitive salaries for the work that they do every single day. And that starts with having solid partners at the federal level and remembering that Democrats, public education, we can't forget about it. It is at the core of who we've been and who we have always been, and I will fight for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And to round out our segment, Tony Pop of CD1 is wondering, What is your plan to hold those responsible for the atrocities committed by ICE and the patrol agents to be held accountable for their actions? This includes violations of constitutional rights, illegal and inhumane detainment, and the murders of multiple people.
So, I think it's really important for us to acknowledge uh, the absolute trauma that so many of us have been through and our neighbors. I was reflecting on the fact that just this past Easter Sunday, and as I was in Mass, it was packed. And we had, children and giggling and laughing and babies crying, and it was pure chaos, but it was music to my ears because for months and months and months, the pews sat empty because people were so afraid to come back to church. And so, what I know is that Minnesotans, we are resilient. And when you come for one of us, you come for all of us. But that also means that we need to bring justice to Minnesota. It is clawing back those dollars, but it is also ripping ICE apart and making sure that the people who perpetrated this chaos, this violence, and took the lives of 2 Minnesotans are held accountable. And I think we have to be very clear that this mass deportation agenda coming out of the Trump administration, this was not a secret. This has been the plan all along. And so while ICE may be a little bit more quiet now, they are still here. It is insidious. And we have to rip this agency apart, but we also have to make sure we are clawing back these resources from ICE, that we are investing in recovery, and that is for small businesses, that is for housing, that is for overall mental health and support for our young people, and that there are people in this administration who must be held criminally liable. And we cannot stop and simply think that just because Donald Trump is going to be out of this office someday, and after his performance this morning, he should be removed immediately, that's not enough. There are criminals who are part of this administration from the top to the bottom, and they must be criminally prosecuted. And I won't stop until we get justice for our people, justice for our immigrant neighbors, but justice for the people of Minnesota overall.
Thank you so much. That's all the questions we have tonight, Peggy. If you have any closing remarks, just briefly, feel free to give them.
Sure. I would just say thank you so much for your time and attention and for being part of this process. I know that things are incredibly difficult, but I have hope. And I have hope because we have been traveling all across the state of Minnesota, and people have been raising their hands and saying, count me in. I am ready to be part of the solution. And in Minnesota, we are the North Star states, and we have demonstrated to the entire country that we are not powerless. We are powerful. And we will make sure that we take this energy into the DFL endorsing convention, that we take this to the primary and to the general. And I will just tell you, this seat is going to stay blue. It is about the kind of Democrat that you want to elect. And so I would be honored and humbled to earn your support. I've been honored and humbled to be your lieutenant governor. Thank you so much, DFLers. I appreciate you, and we'll see you in person very soon.
Thank you so much, Peggy. You all have a good one. So I'm going to do my tech person a huge favor and have Angie Craig raise her hand real quick. There was a link to all of the candidates that resulted in them all being named my name. So we're going to help her out real quick. And while she's doing that, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to have a question submitted and answered by any of the candidates you see tonight, you can do so at www.cd6.com or cd6dfl.com/question. And we will be sure to pass that forward. I'll probably be doing that Thursday. So if you want to hop on, it should be on the Mobilize event as well as the Facebook event, depending upon how you got here tonight. So you can do that. Do you need me to keep going, Jen? Oh, look, looks like she has her hand raised. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to sitting Congresswoman Angie Craig of CD2.
Well, let me lower my hand and just say thank you, Chantal, for putting this together. Thank you to all of you. You all have something incredible in common. and that is absolutely terrible members of Congress that I serve with right now in the House of Representatives. And it will be my goal as your next U.S. Senator to make sure that we are running and positioning ourselves to win up and down the ballot, including taking on every single one of my colleagues in the Republican caucus right now who represent so many of you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you tonight. I'm Angie Craig, and I am running to be your next U.S. Senator. It's been an honor to represent Minnesota's 2nd District in Congress. I'm in my 4th term. You all may remember this was a district that had been in Republican hands for 3/4 of a century when I first ran for Congress. And not many people thought I could win this seat. In fact, the establishment in St. Paul and in Washington didn't think any Democrat could win this seat. And they certainly didn't think that a lesbian mother of 4 was the perfect fit for the 2nd District of Minnesota. But as I often say, we said, hold my beer. I'm running for the U.S. Senate for many of the same reasons that I ran for the House, is because we need to be a country that fights for the working class and the middle class again, not the Epstein class in our country. And we have seen what happens when we have an administration that isn't held accountable, an administration that is out of control. And folks, I'm running because I've had to fight my whole life. My wife Cheryl and I, we had to fight for even the right to exist as a married couple, the right to have our family be recognized in our nation. My wife and I have 4 sons, and we had to fight for the right to even be able to adopt my oldest son, Josh, who's now 28 years old. Folks, my experience in Congress distinguishes me in this U.S. Senate race. Many Democrats take credit for the bill that capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. I wrote that bill in the United States House of Representatives. For Narcan being available over the counter for harm reduction in our country, I led that effort in the Congress. For Medicare to finally be able to negotiate its pricing, I led that effort in the United States Congress. And if you send me to the Senate, I will fight every single day to hold this administration accountable, to make sure that we don't have any more days like today where we wonder if our out of control president is going to literally wipe out an entire civilization. Folks, I'm in this fight because I was the first sitting swing district Democrat when it was in office the first time to call publicly for his impeachment. I will not stay silent. I will not stop fighting. And I will just end with this. We know what we're against. We're against $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid and $186 billion in cuts to SNAP. But as Democrats, we also have to know what we're for, and we have to start delivering on it. I'm for a public option in our country. I'm for affordable childcare. I'm for making sure that our rural communities are strong and thrive. Thank you so much for having me tonight, and I look forward to your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angie. So the first question is from Maren Schroeder of CD1. They ask that the DFL has typically focused on voters in urban and suburban areas, leaving rural Minnesotans feeling disconnected from the party and our legislative candidates struggling. As a statewide candidate, what will you do to reach those rural voters who may be disaffected Republicans and support down ballot candidates in those spaces?
Well, let me give you an example. I think it's a great question, and I would agree with you. I think that too many DFLers who've run or served statewide have been too focused on just the cities. They're important, they're critically important, but we have to make sure that we're running both on the D, the F, and the L. And I'll do it statewide the same way I've done it in my own congressional district. I'm a Democrat, true and true. In fact, Republicans run ads against me every single cycle saying I vote with Democrats 97% of the time. That's why they should vote against me. But don't forget about the F and the L. We've got to come home to our values in total. I'm the current sitting ranking member of the House Committee on Agriculture. Most of my job in Washington these days is helping those rural voters understand why Trump's tariffs, why his war in Iran are bad for family farmers and ag communities. That is my job to make that case. And we've made it pretty damn effective in the 2nd District. See, I win about 9 points more in my races than other Democrats. There's no magic to it except I show up and I talk to these people. I get out of my blue bubble. And then on the labor side, I'm proud to have been endorsed by 14 labor organizations. I think this is another area where we've got to get back out to these folks in labor who have left the Democratic Party. We've got to help them understand that we're the party working for their economic livelihood, for their growth, to make sure that they understand that we understand these values. And I will just say this as I conclude this answer. When I became the Congresswoman in the 2nd District of Minnesota, we only held 5 of the 19 House seats in my congressional district. Today, we have 13 of the 19 state House seats because we have organized. My congressional district has been the top performing organizing district in the entire state every single time that I've run for reelection. And I will bring that passion statewide as your U.S. Senator. We will win up and down the ballot. And that's what we have to do if we want to stop Republicans.
Thank you so much for that. So our next question comes from Diane O'Mara of CD1. And how do you plan to support our public schools and public youth programs given years of underfunding?
Well, look, I believe fundamentally that every child in this country, no matter what zip code they live in, deserve access to good public education. I'm sitting here in front of you today because I had that access. My mom was a teacher for 40 years. My wife was a middle school teacher for 22 years. They're the special ones. And as a member of Congress, that's why education has been among my highest priorities. I wrote the bill that would fully fund special education in our country, the IDEA Full Funding Act. And I haven't got, Stauber to work with me on it until he got too pissed off because I did a town hall in his district, by the way. I've introduced legislation that would help teachers accelerate paying off their student loans after a certain number of years of service to our nation in the public school system. I've led legislation on rebuilding our public schools because when you look around this nation, if you live in a zip code in one part of our country, your school and its facilities and its opportunities may look one way. And if you live in a wealthy county, a wealthy part of this state, your opportunities look very different. Look, I grew up as a kid from a trailer park. And I'm damn proud of that, to be honest with all of you here today. I talk about it on the trail, but I am proud of where I came from. I'm proud of the fact that I had to work 2 jobs to help put myself through a state college. I'm proud to be the daughter of a woman who went to college for 9 years, one class at a time to get her degree to become a public school teacher in this country. And that has guided my work in Congress on education and supporting our teachers and our parents and our students.
Thank you so much. So our final question is from Tony Pop of CD1, and she asks, "What is your plan to hold those responsible for the atrocities committed by ICE and Customs and Border Patrol agents to be held accountable for their actions? This includes violations of constitutional rights, illegal and inhumane detainment, and the murders of multiple people."
Well, look, I'm living through this as a member of Congress real time as I continue to fight this administration from introducing the articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem. And I don't care what they call her fake job right now. If that's impeachable, I think we should impeach her for that as well, in that role as well. But make no mistake about it, we can't fund CBP or ICE in any way whatsoever, not even a sliver of them, until they agree to real reforms in our country. The tactics that they used on the ground here in Minnesota set a horrible precedent of abuse by this administration. And I do believe, and remember, the only way we actually hold these bastards accountable is by winning elections and taking majorities, because then we get to haul them in front of the Oversight Committee. We get to haul them in front of U.S. senators where they have to answer for their actions. And look, I don't think Markwayne Mullin becoming Secretary of DHS is going to change a damn thing, quite candidly. As long as Stephen Miller is in the White House, we are going to have this fight on our hands. And, I'll say two more things here. The conditions in these detention facilities are atrocious. I've been working on a specific case with medical need out of my district that for a young woman, Andrea, who is down in Texas. We've got to have oversight of these detention facilities. They have to agree to change what they're doing there, or Congress should not support a damn cent to this agency. And I've held strong. I didn't think senators should vote for Markwayne Mullin until they to approve him until they agree to actually conduct their activities like regular law enforcement in our country with their tactics. And I wouldn't have voted for Markwayne Mullin or to fill that seat at all until they agree to change the conditions in these detention facilities. And I'll just end with this. Just remember, the statute of limitations on what happened in Minnesota is 5 years. 5 years. So the family of Renee Good, the family of Alex Preddy, who, by the way, my wife and I were not 100% certain that that was not our son that morning. He was out constitutionally observing as well. That the statute of limitations should allow and will allow, when we get power back, for the state of Minnesota to be reimbursed for the economic harm and for the families to be able to sue civilly. And at the end of the day, there should be criminal liability for those ICE agents who murdered Alex Preddy and Renee Good in our community. And then last thing, because I know I probably don't have a lot of time, is what happened in Minnesota. What is happening across this country with this administration has made me even more committed to comprehensive immigration reform in our nation. We are a country of immigrants. We have to be able to have two things at once, and that is we got to be able to have people to come in this country and adjudicate their cases much more quickly, and we have to allow law-abiding immigrants, dreamers, all of those people who are our neighbors to begin to have a path to legal status and perhaps, yes, even U.S. citizenship in this country. We have to be that country. We cannot be anything but that. And what this administration did in Minnesota has only made me more resolved.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Angie. You have a good night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Would just say last, don't take this seat for granted. Don't let anybody tell you that it's a safe blue seat. We're a D+3 state. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So next, we're going to pivot to the state auditor's race. As many of you know, Julie Blaha is retiring, but under her leadership, the auditor's office went from an office on the brink of closure to one with enough energy to attract not one, not two, but 4 candidates to fill her shoes. So let's give it up for Julie Blaha just briefly. She's not here, but round of applause for that. And so tonight you'll hear from all 4 candidates, Zack Filipovich, Adam Jennings, Ben Schierer, and Dan Wolgamott. So we're going to start with former Duluth City Council member Zack Filipovich. Go ahead, Zack.
Hi, Chantal. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. These are really, really important. There's 4 of us. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a kid who grew up in Duluth. My dad was a retired railroad guy, and when I was a kid, instead of playing a board game with me, one night he sat me up on his knee and he taught me to look at numbers a little bit differently. Financial statements are the reflections of our actions and our priorities, and they can help us make better decisions to move forward. In 2013, in Duluth, I was elected as the youngest city councilor in Duluth's history. I served 2 terms and actually represented more people than a state senator does just at that local unit level of government. During that time, we passed earned safe and sick time because I believe no one should have to make the impossible choice between going to work sick or getting a paycheck, and I'm very glad that that is now a statewide policy. Right now, I'm the finance manager of a local nonprofit. We do economic development work. I manage and lead a team of people. I do our internal financials and our budget. And I actually get to go all across rural greater Minnesota, helping rural small business owners and local units of government make better financial decisions. That's my day job. So I'm actually the only accountant in this race. There are 9 people running. 4 of us, as Chantal said, are Democrats. There's 1 accountant. I'm a CMA, or Certified Management Accountant. And that means that I have extensive experience and knowledge in internal controls, financial decision making, and financial reporting. All things that I think a state auditor is going to need, especially in these times. The state auditor's office oversees about $60 billion in local government spending. These are the tax dollars that are closest to each and every one of us. So when you call the police department, you can thank your local cops for coming out and making sure that you're safe. But you can also thank the Minnesota state auditor's office for helping to ensure that those local tax dollars are going to the right places and going to your local police department. Folks, I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, for being in this room. I think I counted over 350 people on this Zoom call. Way to go, Democrats. That's amazing. Standing up for democracy in rooms virtually and physically all across the state. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach. So our first question comes from Meyer of CD1. The fraud issue will be top of the mind for all Minnesotans. However, this issue has been manufactured and weaponized deliberately by Republicans to attack state institutions, elected officials, and Minnesota values as a whole. How will you address the issue fairly without conceding the issues to Republican talking points?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. It's one I think all of us have been getting for a long time during this race. So, a couple distinctions. A, the state auditor's office actually works with local units of government. The fraud that we're seeing about on the news is state level. Those are state programs. That is actually overseen and audited by the legislative auditor. That person and their team is hired by the Minnesota State Legislature. And make no mistake, this is going to be an issue that they're going to convolute and try to tie to this office. And I think we need to be able to have a person with the authority, with the backing of credentials to be able to speak to this issue properly. And so when we talk about the state auditor's office, we want to make sure that our local units of government have the internal controls in place that they need. And that's what I want to do as state auditor, making sure that those local units of government have the guidance available to them. So when your township treasurer has a question about how to report something properly, they can get a hold of somebody at the state auditor's office and be able to record that transaction in the proper way. And have no fear of pushing back on corrupt politicians like Donald Trump, who pardons people who donate to his campaign about $1 million after they steal about billions of dollars in Medicaid and Medicare fraud cases after they're convicted. You can check the Wall Street Journal on some of those numbers in places like Mississippi, Texas, and Florida. And so I have no problem calling that out. And here in Minnesota, I think the solutions that our state legislature is putting in place for our state agencies, like having inspector generals in place to help prevent fraud from the start, is a good step.
Thank you so much for that. So our second question comes from Tony Pop of CD1. And how do you plan to address playing catch up on local audits? Some towns have not had an annual audit for 2 to 3 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the auditor's office has about 90 or so people in place right now. And this actually relates to an issue that I've been talking about on the campaign trail. When I was down in Le Sueur, Minnesota late last year, I was talking with a lady named Janet. She was the township treasurer, and she and she was retiring at the end of the year. And guess what? She did not have a replacement. And that has been happening in places all over Minnesota. There is an accounting shortage. That is why we are seeing the auditor's office have a high turnover rate. And so we need to make sure that our compensation packages in the state auditor's office are high enough and competing with private entities across the state, because they're hiring our good folks who are able to then catch up all of our local communities with their audits and that oversight. And so I think it's critically important to have somebody who has experience lobbying the state legislature, which I have done ever since I was in college. I led student lobby teams as a city councilor. I led lobby teams to our state capitol with very, very good results. You can check out some of the fantastic bills that we got passed up here for the Duluth and Northeast region of Minnesota, in part thanks to the lobbying efforts that we've done.
Thank you so much. So the last question for the night is from Marin Schroeder of CD1, and says the DFL has typically focused on voters in urban and suburban areas, leaving rural Minnesotans feeling disconnected from the party and legislative candidates struggling. As a statewide candidate, what will you do to reach those rural voters who might be disaffected Republicans and support down ballot candidates in these spaces?
Yeah, well, as as a person running for a down ballot race, this question is actually really, really important to me, and I plan to get out to everywhere I can across Minnesota. I believe that I have the energy to do that. We have the team to do that, to organize on a statewide level, and I've already been to so many places across our state. I've been to Moorhead and Red Lake and Wadena and New Ulm and down in Owatonna. I mentioned LeSueur and places right up here in our neck of the woods up in northeast Minnesota, of course, as well. And so being able to reach out and connect with people, just on a day-to-day basis in this campaign, being able to organize and being able to have this retail politic that is going to be so critical in a campaign like the state auditor's office is going to be important. I've shown that that I can do that here during this campaign already. In my day job, I think I mentioned I am mostly working with rural business owners. I'm talking with local units of government across rural Minnesota, helping them with their loan funds. I'm valuing businesses in rural parts of the state as a part of my day job. I'll just say too, one of the folks that I talk about this campaign with, and he actually stays, or he actually allows me to stay at his house because we're doing this campaign on the cheap because we have to. This is a truly grassroots campaign. He's a Republican, and we've been kind of going back and forth. And I asked him, "Hey Joe, what do you think of all this ICE stuff and everything that's going on?" He's like, "This is unconstitutional," without hesitation. And so we're going to be able to get a lot of these Republican voters back on our side because they deserve to be, because they know that the actions of this president are unconstitutional, and we're going to protect each and every one of our local communities with the state auditor's office.
Awesome. Thank you much. Thank you so much, Zach. Go ahead if you have any closing remarks.
I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for being here tonight. I have the background to do this job starting day one. Did I mention that I'm the only accountant in this race? I hope you guys heard that. I have the local government experience to do this job. I have actually sat on both sides of the audit table with folks. I'm a former government employee doing financials. I know gas or governmental auditing standards. I am labor endorsed, and labor is a big part of my background. And thank you all for being here. My name is Zack Filipovich. I'd be honored to have your support, and you can go to zack4mn.com, ZACKFORMN.com to learn more. Thanks much.
Thank you so much, Zach. Just a reminder again that if you have any questions you want to give these candidates, you can submit them until Thursday at cd6dfl.com/question. And so moving right along, we're going to hand off next to the mayor of Tonka Bay, Adam Jennings.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be here. My name is Adam Jennings. I'm also running for Minnesota State Auditor. I think we should start a quartet, even though I think we're all be baritone and it wouldn't be a whole lot of fun. But yeah, no, I'm a combat veteran. I have 24 years of experience in finance. I'm a small business owner who covers all of his insurance. They don't pay a dime for his 30 employees. I'm the mayor of a small town of around 1,500. We've improved roughly 25% of our water, sewer, and roads since I've been here. Created a capital plan that hadn't been touched since the 60s. And I'm the father of two kids that are growing up remarkably too fast. I got my start years ago. I feel like I got to live that elusive American dream that seems to be shrinking each year for so many folks. And I built pickup trucks at the Ford Twin Cities assembly plant in St. Paul. And I was a member of the UAW, and the affordability that provided me allowed to create the basis in my life to buy my first little 740 square foot home. I had fantastic health care. I made a livable wage. And we need to do everything we can until we get Medicare for all to stand behind our unions so that others can do that, and we can start to protect and grow that middle class again. While I was there, September 11th happened. I was originally supposed to be in artillery. I decided I wanted to get involved and do something, but it turns out I'm colorblind, and they won't let me do that. And I got reassigned to finance, and that was kind of my introduction to things. I was deployed And while I was abroad, I studied financial accounting and macroeconomics, and just absolutely fell in love with it. Truly, I was learning about banking, the Fed, interest rates, the importance of capital investment, and I decided that this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I eventually got back to the States, went to the Carlson School of Management, where I got my MBA in finance, went to work in the private sector, and ultimately worked my way up and oversaw a $9.2 billion portfolio. Now you fast forward to today, small business owner, 30 employees, like I was saying, none of whom pay a dime in healthcare. I've had 2 employees who have been able to go out and buy homes of their own in their 20s because of the work that they've been able to do and the affordability that they've had. And I think it's important to bring people along with you because it really does take a village. And I've also been on city council now for the last 10 years, 6 of which I've been mayor. Now this particular position, is about service, it's about accountability, and it's also about trust. And I'll tell you, I don't recognize our country right now. I don't recognize our nation. And I feel like I've always stepped forward in times of great need. And I feel like Minnesota is in a time of great need right now. And I feel like I have the experience to come forward and beat a Republican and prevent MAGA from coming in and potentially weaponizing this office in the future. And that's why I'm here today. And my name is Adam Jennings, and I would be honored to be your next Minnesota State Auditor. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. So we're going to do the same questions. So just as a refresher, question 1 is from Meyer of CD1. The fraud issue will be the top of mind for all Minnesotans. However, this issue has been manufactured and weaponized deliberately by Republicans to attack state institutions, elected officials, and Minnesota values as a whole. How will you address the issue fairly without conceding the issue to Republican talking points?
Absolutely. It's one of those things, we don't have time to teach everybody about how this works because it's way too wonky. There are too many moving parts. And, if we've got folks out there, they probably have about 7 seconds to listen to an auditor candidate over the next, 8 months. So what we do is we just take the fight right back to them. It's basically, you guys want to talk about fraud? Absolutely. I'm going to talk about a $400 million plane from Qatar. I want to talk about meme coin that you can purchase from the president to buy yourself a pardon. I want to talk about the $50,000 that Tom Homan received that has magically disappeared. The Republican Party, you guys have open grift going on in your party right now today. And it's absolute crickets from you guys. And you want to come in and you want to try and make this a partisan issue. We're not dealing with red issues or blue issues. We're dealing with green issues at the end of the day. If you're going to call balls and strikes, you got to call them fairly. And if you're going to come in and make it partisan, then it doesn't mean you're fit for this particular position.
Thank you so much, Adam. So question number 2 is from Marin Schroeder of CD1. Oh, sorry. We're actually going to start with Tony Pops. So how do you plan to address playing catch up on local audits? Some towns have not had an annual audit in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So I've talked about this quite a bit, actually. So this office got absolutely gutted during the Pellini administration. The high watermark for this office used to be 165 individuals. Right now, we're roughly at 90. I've put together a plan. We could hire an additional 60 people for about $9 million for this particular office. And I know that both Rebecca Otto and Julie Blaha have attempted to do that, but it's kind of flown under the radar, and I don't think they've been able to get much traction. If there's one silver lining in the fact that everybody's talking about fraud right now, is that it's center of mind for the legislature, the candidates, the electorate. And $9 million isn't a lot. When you take a look at that relative to a $33 billion budget, we're only talking about 0.02%. So I think it's about getting the office back up to full staffing. I think we've also put together a funding plan potentially to, there's a lot of small cities out there. As a small town mayor, I understand the importance of watching every single nickel. I mean, we bought a brand new pickup truck for our public works department this last fall. I mean, I'm talking nothing big. This is like an F-350, and that was like 4% of our operating budget. So these guys are watching every single dime to make sure that their budgets work. If we were to provide a $30,000 grant as a pilot program for every city that has, there's 856 cities in the state of Minnesota, half of those have a population of less than 1,000. If you have a population of less than 1,000, you get a $30,000 grant to pay for your your auditing services, that not only removes that cost burden for the local community, we'd throw in a caveat that those services would have to be provided by the OSA, which would help centralize everything to help speed up the annual reports. And then lastly, I just want to throw in, just as a matter of course, right now, the way the legislation is set up, if you are a city that has revenue of less than $1 million, you're required to only have an audit once every 5 years. If you have anything in excess of $1 million, you then do it on an annual basis. But I think it's largely about staffing. At the end of the day, we need more people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. So the final question to close us out will be Maren Schroeder of CD1. The DFLs typically focused on voters in urban and suburban areas, leaving rural Minnesotans feeling disconnected from the party and their legislative candidates struggling. As a statewide candidate, what will you do to reach those rural voters who may be disaffected Republicans and support down ballot candidates in these spaces?
Yeah, so this is, since this race started, we announced on September 29th. And since that time, I put 18,000 miles on my truck, driving everywhere from Hollick down to Houston a few times. We've been all over Ada, Wadena, everywhere. And I would continue to vow, as both Amy Klobuchar and Steve Simon do, to visit all 87 counties in this particular state. If you're going to do a statewide job, you've got statewide responsibilities. So it's about being present and having those conversations. I think this also gets back down to trying to help fund those small cities that are out there. We don't write policy, but we do get one heck of a megaphone as an auditor, and we can help partner with legislators to create ways to bring funding into local communities. And this gets back down to what I was talking about earlier with a $30,000 grant to a small community is a huge boon. We have a $2 million operating budget in Tonka Bay, which is significantly bigger than a lot of communities out there. But if you think about it, $30,000 represents about 1.5% of our overall budget. I mean, that's a significant amount of money. Local communities could give it back as a tax break. They could use it to buy, desperately needed equipment or to repair their buildings. And again, it helps centralize everything into the state auditor's office so that the communication between those communities and the office itself is streamlined.
Sure. Thank you so much, Adam. Do you have any closing remarks before we close out your segment?
Yeah, I've said this before, ultimately at the end of the day, this is a management position. I have over 20 years of management experience. I was first promoted in my late 20s, oversaw a crew of 37. When I was in the Army, I oversaw 120 soldiers. Right now, today, between my small business and the city, I oversee 103. Somebody's got to be ready day one to step in and take over on this particular job. And, you're going to have a team of professionals that you're working with. As a small town mayor, I've got a finance director, I've got an engineer, I've got a lawyer. If I need to build a road, I go to the engineer. If I've got a legal question, I work with my lawyer. If we're going to do something about the books, I work with them. But it's about pulling teams together. And as the state auditor, you're not only overseeing the staff right now, which is 90, which frankly I think needs to be 150, but you're also interfacing with that legislature. And then you're also providing oversight for roughly 3,500 entities throughout the state that represent about $60 billion in asset. I mean, it's one of those things. If you're not prepared and you don't have this kind of experience, you could easily get overwhelmed. And it comes down to this. I love this adage. I'll end it with this. The best thing to do is to make the right decision. The next best thing to do is to make the wrong decision. But the absolute worst thing to do is make no decision. And in an executive position, if you're not prepared, it's very easy to get overwhelmed and freeze, and you don't make decisions. And that's where things start to get wrapped around the axle. And we, especially now with everything that's going on politically, we've got to make sure that this office moves forward. So thank you. I'm Adam Jennings. I would love to be your next Minnesota State Auditor.
Thank you so much, Adam. You have a good night.
You too.
Oh, thank you. So we're just going to keep on moving as we're button up on time here. So we're going to pass it off to the former mayor of Fergus Falls, Ben Schierer.
Thanks, Chantal. Thanks, Lori and Jennifer and everyone else who put this together. Yeah, my name is Ben Schierer, and I too am running to be Minnesota's next state auditor. But to tell you the truth, I haven't had a lot of time to think about the state auditor's race today. I've been thinking a lot about the situation in the Middle East and the actions of this administration and how they've turned from merely corrupt and incompetent to completely unhinged, threatening that a whole civilization will die tonight. Of course, we understand this is unacceptable, and I think that we need to just reflect on how we get ourselves out of this disaster, but also how we got here. I know a lot of people are scared right now. I know my wife is scared. My kids are scared. I know a lot of you are probably scared. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of issues, and we have talked about a lot of issues that are important to Minnesota. But I just want to take a moment to acknowledge what is happening in our world. And I hope you'd join me in reflecting on that and thinking about the people of Iran, and the people of the Middle East, and the men and women of our armed services, and just pray that we might find peace in this important moment. And I think it's also important for us to reflect on how we got here. And, when I started this campaign, one of the very first things I said was that Donald Trump is in the White House because Democrats have lost their ability to connect to rural voters. And I think that's really important. And I sort of think in the context of this discussion tonight about rural issues, it's important for us as DFLers to recognize that. And as DFLers, if we're going to be a party for the entire state, we have to have candidates from the entire state. I think there's an opportunity right now in this moment with everything happening. There is a moment that we have the opportunity to win back some of the voters that we've lost over the last couple decades. But we need to have candidates who've lived and worked and served in those communities that we've lost, that we want to win back. That's what this entire campaign is about. That's what my entire public service career has been about, is connecting with these voters in rural areas, bridging the rural-urban divide and delivering results for communities. That's what I want to do as state auditor. I'm looking forward to talking about some of the issues tonight, but I just wanted to acknowledge that tonight and say thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Ben. So we'll dive right into it. So the first question, as you may recall, is from Meyer of CD1. The fraud issue will be top of the mind for all Minnesotans. However, this issue has been manufactured and weaponized deliberately by Republicans to attack state institutions, elected officials, and Minnesota values as a whole. How will you address the issue fairly without conceding to Republican talking points?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, and it's been weaponized. It's been used to score political points, but it's also real. And I think we need to acknowledge that as Democrats, right? It's going to be talked about by Democrats and Republicans, and rightfully so, because the fraud is unacceptable. We have to acknowledge that. I think there's important distinctions that people need to know about the difference between the work that the state auditor does, overseeing local governments, and the work that the Office of the Legislative Auditor does, overseeing the state agencies. And that's really important distinction when you're doing the work. But the truth of the matter is, most people don't know, most people don't care. They just want to know what you're going to do to stop the fraud. And so that's what I talk about, is what I'll do on day one as state auditor, based on what I actually have done as a small business owner and what I've done as the mayor. So first of all, on day one, I think it's important that we have a fraud hotline across the state that's available to the public, but also to work with local units of government so they have the resources to install fraud hotlines for local employees, for public employees at the local level. That's how you can stop it at the local level. And that's not just a campaign promise or a slogan. That's what we actually did in Fergus Falls while I was mayor, long before fraud was in the headlines, because that's what good government looks like. The second thing I would say is the 85 plus employees in the state auditor's office. I'd make sure, and those are public accountants, those are professional auditors. I would make sure that all 85 plus employees of those in that office are available to any state agency, any local unit of government that needs it to fight fraud. We have to show that this is an all hands on deck approach, because the fraud has to be stopped. And the last thing I would say is this: from what I've learned in my experience, it's about a culture of accountability. It's about uniform internal controls across all divisions. And it's a laser focus on prevention. We can't be focused on performing autopsies. We have to cut the cancer out where it starts, and here's how we can do that. Right now, currently, the auditor performs financial and compliance audits on local units of governments. I think there's an opportunity in this moment to expand that work to include performance audits of local governments. So you're not only looking backwards at what has happened and asking, did you do things right? But you're looking forward and saying, are we doing the right things? And things like internal controls and IT, cybersecurity. There's opportunities and there's examples of where this has worked. In Washington State, for example, they perform performance audits on 2,400 units of local government. It costs about $15 million. They do it through an enterprise fund, so it's not a direct taxpayer expense. And studies have shown that for every dollar they invest in those performance audits in Washington State, they return $16 for every dollar invested. So at a time when property taxes are at a breaking point, and public trust has eroded, what we can do is we can show that we can have efficiency and effective local government. Performance audits is a way to do that. And that's what I would do. That's what I would advocate for. And that's how I address the fraud issue.
Thank you so much, Ben. So moving right along to the next question, Tony Pop of CD1 asks, how do you plan to address playing catch up on those local audits? Some towns haven't had an annual audit in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think that, the most important thing is you have to show up and actually talk to the people in local units of government. That's what we've done. Currently, right now, I work with one of the initiative foundations. I'm the director of civic partnerships. I work with 9 counties, 82 cities, 35 school districts, 235 townships. Anyway, 410 units of government all. But I know the importance of showing up. I've talked to city clerk and treasurers in small towns of less than 100 people. We're up in Lake Park and Audubon not long ago talking with clerks and treasurers. Understanding the needs of these local units of government is critical to assisting them in the needs. A couple ideas, I think we could work with MnSCU and make sure that there's pathways into some of these positions and make sure that people know that these are valuable in important positions. Second thing, I think we need to make sure that we're paying our public accountants. So there is a accountant shortage, there's an auditor shortage, and we need to make sure that we're paying our public employees and hiring them as full-time employees and paying them appropriately. And then the third thing I think is just providing training for some of the private audit firms, making sure that they're able to do the audits, for the public units of government in a way that is acceptable. So those are just some of the ideas I would have. But I think the most important thing is we have to show up in these communities, because the communities that haven't had these audits, guess what? They're rural communities. And we need to show up and find out what are the obstacles that they're facing, not only to audits, but also just good, efficient, effective government in general. Make sure that we provide the tools and resources to those units of government. Showing up is so important. I can't say it enough.
Thank you so much, Ben. So just to close out with our final question from Maren Schroeder of CD1, the DFL is typically focused on voters in urban and suburban areas, leaving rural Minnesotans feeling disconnected from the party and our legislative candidates struggling. As a statewide candidate, what will you do to reach those rural voters who might be disaffected Republicans and support down-ballot candidates in these spaces?
Yeah, this is what I've done my entire public career. You have to show up. The other thing is you knock on every door, right? My son and I were down knocking for a St. Paul, for a legislative race down St. Paul area a couple years ago, and we were walking around, and I said to my son, I said, you notice that every door we knock on has a sign for the candidate that we're knocking for. That doesn't work in Fergus Falls. You knock on every door and you talk to everybody, right? So we have done that. We've shown up. And if you look at, we have to bridge the rural urban divide. I think everyone's going to talk about the bridging the rural urban divide. If you look at our campaign, we're showing what that looks like. We have earned the endorsement of everyone from Congressman Colin Peterson to Attorney General Keith Ellison. We have Senate President Bobby Joe Champion. Today we just announced Senator Claire Umu Verbatim. We have township board supervisors in rural communities. We have school board members. We've been all around this. We've been from Hallock down to Laverne. We've got from Winona up to International Falls. I know as a mayor of one of these communities that has been disaffected, that went 64% for Trump the night I was elected mayor. I know you have to show up, you have to listen, and you talk to everybody. That's how you do it. And we can do it as a party too, by the way. We can do it, but we need candidates who've actually been out in those areas and are willing to knock on those doors.
Thank you so much, Ben. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to say this. Thanks to everyone for being here tonight. This has been a great race. There's 4 great candidates in this race. It's been a real pleasure to get to know them as people and as candidates. I'll say this. I'm running for this office. Everyone in this race is going to talk about the connection to local government. I have 16 years. I grew up in a rural community, the ones that we're talking about tonight. My wife and I started 2 Main Street businesses here in Fergus Falls. We're raising our 5 kids here. I served 16 years as a local elected official, including 2 terms as mayor, elected twice as a rural progressive in one of the reddest parts of the state. That is critical to why I'm running for state auditor. I think we can reach these voters, but we need candidates who've lived out here. I would say this. During those 16 years in local office, I've built relationships across the state with other local elected officials. I've been a Bush Fellow New Deal leader and a presidential leadership scholar. And I say all that only because of this. All of that work was focused on bridging the rural-urban divide and strengthening local communities across our state. And the last thing I would say is this. I said it before, but I just can't emphasize it enough. If we're going to be a party for the entire state, we have to have candidates from the entire state who can connect with those voters we've lost over the last couple decades. We need candidates who've lived and worked and served in rural communities. And if you look at the endorsements, if you look at the support that we have across the state, across our party, across all levels of government, you will see that we are showing what that looks like. We are showing what is possible, and we are showing that we can be a party that works for everyone in this state. That's why I'm running for state auditor. I want to say thanks to everyone for joining us, and I would really love to earn your support.
Thank you so much, Ben. You have a good night.
Thanks.
So we have one more candidate to go, which will be the House District Representative for 14B in the St. Cloud area, Representative Dan Wolgamott.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chantal. Good evening, Democrats. My name is Dan Wolgamott. I'm a 4-term member of the Minnesota House from St. Cloud. I oversee the 3rd largest budget in state government as higher education chair, and I'm the progressive candidate for state auditor. Now, the office of state auditor matters. As our auditor, I'll protect our local tax dollars from being exploited by corporate giveaways and secret AI data center schemes funded by billionaire tech companies. As a member of the State Board of Investment, I will demand that we divest from corporations who don't hold true to our values, the corporations who fuel genocide and human rights abuses and do business with ICE. I will refuse to let Republicans use fraud as a weapon to gut programs that help the most vulnerable Minnesotans. That's why I have a plan to expand the auditor's authority to audit state agencies and protect the programs that we as Democrats use to improve people's lives. I've never walked away from my progressive values, and I've taken on tough fights and won. I've stood up to the haters in my district to make Minnesota a trans refugee state and codify abortion access for all Minnesotans. I stood up to big business to enact paid family medical leave statewide for working families. And do we have any teachers on the call tonight? Then you know that we tax the rich to improve the pensions of our hardworking teachers. I'm the only candidate in this race who's ever defeated a Republican. I'm the only Democrat in the House to represent a Trump district. I'm battle tested. I know how to take on the onslaught of right-wing attacks, deliver huge progressive victories, and win. That's why I'm running for state auditor. That's why our campaign has support in every single congressional district, and that's why I'm asking you to join our winning team to elect a proven progressive champion as our state auditor.
Thank you so much, Dan. So we'll just move right into the first question, which is Meyer from CD1. The fraud issue will be the top of the mind for all Minnesotans. However, this issue has been manufactured and weaponized deliberately by Republicans to attack state institutions, elected officials, and Minnesota values as a whole. How will you address the issue fairly without conceding the issue to Republican talking points?
This is a critical question, so thank you for submitting it. I want to be clear. I will refuse to let Republicans use fraud as a weapon to gut programs that help the most vulnerable Minnesotans. I see it all the time in my work at the Capitol. Anytime that we as Democrats want to bring forward a program to improve people's lives, Republicans automatically use fraud as an excuse to not support that. We can't allow that to happen. So I'm putting forward a plan that would expand the auditor's authority to audit state agencies so that we can protect these programs. Under my plan, the auditor would have the authority to audit state agencies, conduct investigations, issue subpoenas, refer matters for prosecution. This plan is based off of the Office of Inspector General bill that passed the Senate on a 60-7 vote. except for instead of having that authority go to someone who's appointed by the governor, it has that authority going to someone who is directly elected by the people of Minnesota and accountable to Minnesotans. There are 20 states in the US who have an auditor that audits state agencies, including Iowa. I hate to admit it, but Iowa does this better than us. It's time to make Minnesota the 21st state to have an auditor who audits state agencies so that we can restore the trust and confidence and protect the programs that we as Democrats fight so hard for so that we can improve people's lives.
Thank you so much, Dan. So question number 2 is from Tony Pop of CD1. How do you plan to address playing catch up on local audits? Some towns haven't had an annual audit in 2 to 3 years.
Here's the deal. We are trying to achieve a 21st century audit pace using 20th century technology. The biggest thing I'm hearing from local governments all throughout the state is a bottleneck caused by outdated software and manual data entry that slows down our local audits. It's happening at the county level. I recently met with the county commissioners in my area, Stearns County, and I actually did a demo for what's called the Maxis system, which is what they use for public assistance eligibility. That's the same system they've been using since 1989. So to clear this backlog, we have to be aggressive when it comes to modernizing the digital infrastructure of both the state auditor's office and our local governments. We've got to invest in new technology, automated reporting tools, secure user-friendly portals where local clerks can easily upload their data, and make sure that we are having a modernized system so they don't have to waste time wrestling with outdated spreadsheets and slow dated technology. So we can upgrade our technology, we can quickly flag anomalies, we can streamline the entire review process. It'll speed up the workflow and also respect the time of our local public servants all across greater Minnesota and the entire state who are already stretched so thin. So as our next state auditor, I will take my experiences working with local governments throughout the state and make sure that we have the modern technology that we need to get through these local audits and make sure that our local governments are getting the resources they need to deliver those critical services.
Thank you so much, Dan. So we just have one more question from Marin Schroeder of CD1. The DFL is typically focused on voters in urban and suburban areas, leaving rural Minnesotans feeling disconnected from the party and legislative candidates struggling. As a statewide candidate, what will you do to reach those rural voters who might be disaffected Republicans and support down ballot candidates in these spaces?
I am the only candidate in this race who has ever defeated a Republican. I'm the only Democrat in the House to represent a district won by Donald Trump. I know how to connect with the voters that we need, not only keep the auditor's office blue, but to help elect our candidates up and down the ballot. We do that by being strong in our progressive values. I was very proud to be the linchpin, oftentimes the deciding vote for the LFG trifecta historic victories of the 23-24 biennium. I was bold for my progressive values. We transformed our state. And then I turned right around and became the top performing House Democrat in the state, the only one to win a Trump district. We've got to be bold in our progressive values. We can't capitulate to some imaginary middle, and we've got to get out and meet people where they're at. Every one of my elections since 2014, I've knocked on over 10,000 doors. We've got to get out there and connect with people, meet people where they're at. And these experiences I've had in my tough campaigns will be a huge asset with me as the auditor candidate on our ticket. I'm so eager to get out throughout the state and connect with our local candidates. All politics is local. I want to use my legislative race experiences to empower our candidates in every corner of the state, make sure we're putting in the work, make sure we're listening to voters from all across the spectrum, earning that trust, and then delivering the results. That's how I've managed to hold on in one of the toughest districts in the state. That's what we're going to do to keep the auditor's office blue. Remember, this is going to be a tough race. The Republicans came within 10,000 votes last election of getting their hands on the auditor's office. We cannot allow them to have a MAGA take over the auditor's office. That's why we need a battle-tested candidate who has experience taking on the Republican right-wing heat, cutting through that noise and connecting with voters. That's what I've done my entire legislative career. That's what I'll do as our auditor nominee.
Thank you so much, Dan. Do you have any other closing remarks?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you to all those who led this forum and make clear that this is a critical election. We have an opportunity to take advantage of the momentum and to tap in to the furor that is spreading throughout our state of passion for each other, of loving our neighbors and showing up. That's going to be critical to this auditor's office, and we can deliver big victories for our progressive values. I've got the experience in the House to get the job done on day one. I've got a strong plan to not allow Republicans to weaponize fraud to hurt the work that we do as Democrats to improve people's lives. And I've got the battle tested, proving winning record that we need to reach those voters to not only win the auditor's office, but make sure that we elect huge historic majorities up and down the ballot of Democrats so that we can get back to doing the work of improving people's lives. My name is Dan Wolgamott, and I'm proud to be the proven progressive champion for state auditor. I ask you to join our winning team. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. You have a good night. So thank you all for coming this evening. It was wonderful to see 365 people I caught at our peak, invested in DFL politics, taking a time out of their Tuesday night and spending it with us. Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the CD6 YouTube channel in the next couple of days. You can find us at youtube.com/@CD6DFL. If you have any questions for the candidates, now that you've gotten to learn a little more about them, you can submit them at cd6dfl.com/question before Thursday to get them passed up to the candidates in these races. Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at the DFL State Convention, May 29th through the 31st in Rochester. Y'all have a good night.